Clara Valley. Pursuant to this court's ruling, your marriage to Julian Vale is hereby terminated. You are awarded no marital property, no spousal support, and no housing assistance. The court recommends that you vacate the premises within 30 days. The gavel came down like someone had shoved my head underwater. He sat on the hard wooden chair, hands folded over my stomach, 8 months pregnant and struggling for every breath. The courtroom smelled of stale coffee and old paper, mixed with Julian's cologne, the one I'd helped him pick out. They worn it deliberately today. They made sure everything looked perfect today. He sat at the plaintiff's table, suit pressed, tie straight. It looked just like he had the day we met, clean, reliable, like a good man who would never hurt anyone. The judge was still talking, but his voice had gone distant, like it was coming through a thick wall. My nails dug into my palms. 4 fingers, one by one, until the pain became something I could hold on to. I didn't cry. He wouldn't cry. Julian stood up, walked around the oak table, and came to me. His steps were light, like a winner approaching the podium. He leaned down, his lips nearly touching my ear, his warm breath against my neck. See, he whispered. Without me, you're nothing. You came from trash, Clara. You should go back to trash. He looked up at him. His eyes were brown, that warm, chocolate brown. I'd woken up to those eyes countless mornings and told myself I was lucky. I'd seen everything I'd never had in those eyes, security, belonging, a place I could call home. Now those eyes held only cold satisfaction. I'll watch you crawl back, he said, straightening his suit jacket and walking toward the door. He pushed myself up from the table. My stomach was heavy, my legs shaking, but I stood. My hand slid to my belly, feeling the small life moving inside through the thin fabric of my maternity dress. It was kicking. It had been kicking all along, like he was reminding me he was still here. He took a breath and walked toward the door. In. Bang. The heavy double doors burst open from outside with such force that even Judge Carter, behind the bench, flinched back. 4 men in black tactical gear filed in, positioning themselves at the corners of the room with practiced precision. Their movements were synchronized, like 4 shadows of the same person. Then she walked in. She wore a perfectly tailored white cashmere coat, her silver-gray hair swept into a low bun. No necklace. Only a thin platinum bracelet on her wrist. She looked about 60, but she moved with the kind of unhurried certainty that comes only from someone who has never had to answer to anyone. She came straight toward me. The room was silent. He could hear the air moving through the vents. She stopped 3 feet away. Then she raised her hand, gloved in thin leather, and touched my cheek. The contact was light as a feather, but I froze. Her eyes were ice blue. Exactly the same color as mine. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice cracking like glass, oh my God. It's you. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Who are you? He finally managed. She didn't answer. She just looked at me, those blue eyes filling with tears. The tears stayed there, suspended, like a restraint practiced over 30 years. I'm your mother, she said. Julian spun around. What? I'm your mother, she said again, her voice softer this time, her fingertips sliding from my cheek to my chin, like she was trying to confirm I was real. I've been looking for you for 30 years. Julian lunged forward, grabbing for her arm. Back before his hand touched her, one of the black-clad men was there, blocking him, appearing as if he'd grown out of the wall. Ma'am, Julian's voice cracked for the first time. She didn't look at him. No tonse. She just looked into my eyes, those same blue eyes, and whispered, you were stolen. From the hospital. Less than 12 hours after you were born, a nurse took you, said you were not well, needed special care. By the time I found the nurse, she was gone. And so were you. My hands started to shake. The baby kicked again, like he sensed something. He pressed my hand to my stomach and stepped back. I didn't know this woman. I'd never seen her. But her eyes were the same ones I saw in the mirror every morning. The eyes I'd hated for being too pale, too different, making me stand out in every foster home. My name is Eleanor Sterling, she said. I know this is hard to believe. But I have proof. My lawyer has brought all of it. Whispers spread through the courtroom. Sterling? That name made several reporters in the back row sit bolt upright. Julian's attorney, M.A. Pique, stood up, his pudgy fingers wiping sweat from his forehead. Your Honor, I object. This woman, this lady, her sudden intrusion is a serious disruption of court. Judge Carter wasn't listening to him. He was looking at Eleanor Sterling with an expression I couldn't read. He understood why later. M.A. Sterling, he said, his voice lower than before, do you have something to present to this court? Eleanor finally pulled her gaze from my face. She turned to the bench, spine straight. I'm here to request an immediate suspension of today's ruling, she said, her voice calm as a shopping list, based on fraud, forged evidence, and criminal conspiracy. M.A. Pike's face went red. This is M.A. Grant, Eleanor said. A silver-haired woman in a black suit walked in through the door. He recognized her face, Naomi Grant, the woman who'd won 3 Supreme Court cases, the woman who'd bankrupted 2 pharmaceutical companies. She carried 2 thick black folders, walking with the steady confidence of someone in her own living room. She set the folders on the clerk's desk and turned to Judge Carter. Your Honor, we submit the following evidence. First, the defendant, Julian Vale, knew of Clara Vale's biological connection to the Sterling family prior to their marriage and deliberately concealed this information for financial gain. Second, the defendant transferred over $4,700,000 in marital assets during the marriage through shell companies and forged medical records to portray the plaintiff as mentally unstable. Third, the defendant's late mother, Margaret Vale, confessed to participating in the abduction of an infant girl from Isate Matthews Hospital maternity ward 30 years ago, an infant since confirmed by DNA testing to be Clara Vale. The courtroom went silent for 1 second. Then it exploded. Reporters shot up from their seats. Someone knocked over a notebook. Julian's face went from white to red to gray. M.A. Pike's briefcase hit the floor. I didn't move. He just stood there, one hand on my stomach, looking at the woman who said she was my mother. 7 years ago. A nurse. Stolen. I'd always been told I wasn't given up. Every foster care social worker would say, your mother left you at the hospital, Clara. She didn't leave any contact information. They always said it with that slight frown, like, see, even your own mother didn't want you. He spent years making peace with it. He told myself it was fine. He'd never been abused, I just hadn't been loved. Those were different things. You could live without love. You could learn not to need it. But standing here now, in this courtroom that smelled of stale coffee, looking into those ice blue eyes exactly like mine, I felt something deep in my chest crack. Not slowly. Like I suddenly taking too much weight, snap, and the whole surface gave way. You're saying, I heard my own voice, so quiet it came from far away, you've been looking for me all this time. Eleanor's tears finally fell. Every day, she said, every day. Every hour. He'd never seen Julian lose his composure like this. He stood behind the plaintiff's table, one hand gripping the edge, knuckles white. His smile was still there, but it had twisted, like a painting someone had crumpled. This is absurd, he said, his voice carrying a strange lightness, like he was trying to convince himself it was a joke. I've known Clara for 4 years. She never mentioned any Sterling family. She was. He stopped. He watched him. For the first time, I saw real panic in his eyes, the kind that appears when a carefully constructed world suddenly cracks open. She was what? Naomi Grant turned to face him, her voice calm as if asking about the weather. An orphan? A nobody from the foster system? Someone you could control, with no family to come after you. Julian's mouth opened and closed. Your Honor, M.A. Pike finally found his voice, his fat hand waving in the air. I request that this court declare this woman, this so-called M.S. Sterling, her intrusion, it's illegal. We've already concluded today's proceedings. The judgment has been read. I love this is. The judgment was based on false evidence, Naomi said, not even turning around. M.A. Pique, I suggest you sit down. The next 15 minutes aren't going to be pleasant for you. M.A. Pike's mouth formed a perfect O. Naomi opened the first folder. Inside was a photograph, a copy, but clear, a faded birth certificate, edges yellowed, the blue stamp of St. Matthew's Hospital in the corner. The baby's name, Sterling female. Date of birth, this same month, 30 years ago. Parents, Richard Sterling, Eleanor Sterling. This is the original birth record from the hospital, Naomi said. After the infant's disappearance, this record was marked, transferred to Child Protective Services. But Child Protective Services has no record of receiving this infant. In fact, this record was modified 3 months after the infant's disappearance. The father, Phil. She flipped to the next page. Was covered with white correction fluid. We used spectral analysis to recover the original text underneath. She placed the spectral image in front of the judge. The father's name, the one that had been covered, was not Richard Sterling. It was Thomas Carter. He heard a gasp. From the bench. He looked up. Judge Carter's face, that stern, imposing face I'd stared at for hours, was white as paper. He sat there like someone had punched him in the chest. That's impossible, he whispered. Thomas? Eleanor's voice had changed too, her gaze moving from the photo to the bench. Thomas, you didn't know. People in the courtroom started looking at each other. Thomas? Jorge Thomas Carter? What connection did he have with this woman, the billionaire Eleanor Sterling? Why was his name appearing in the father's field on that infant record? Judge Carter slowly, painfully, removed his glasses and set them on the desk. His hands were shaking. Those hands that had brought down so many gavels, delivered so many judgments, those hands were shaking. I didn't know, he said, his voice hoarse, almost inaudible. No one ever told me. Eleanor let out a short, almost sobbing laugh. They told me the baby died. Richard held me and said, he said she stopped breathing in the delivery room. He made me sign papers, said, the hospital needs confirmation of facts. It was all fake. I love it. That nurse, Margaret Vale, she took my daughter from me. And my husband. She stopped. Her shoulders started to shake, but her voice held. And my husband Richard, he knew the child wasn't his. He had a paternity test done. He never told me the results. He never said anything. He did only one thing, he had that nurse hide my daughter somewhere I'd never find her. Julian let out a sharp, strangled laugh, the kind of sound a person makes when their throat is being squeezed. You're making this up, he said, all of you, Ms. Sterling. When exactly did you find out you had a long-lost daughter? How did you find her? How did you know, how could you possibly? She's pregnant with your child, Eleanor said, finally turning to face him. There's a very rare genetic marker in our family's blood. Clara's second trimester blood work picked it up. Our medical database, the one funded by the Sterling Foundation, matched it automatically. It took me 3 weeks to confirm it. 3 weeks of waking up at 3 in the morning, wondering, what if it's wrong again? What do I do then? Her voice finally cracked. But it wasn't wrong. You are my daughter. Julian's lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes scanned the courtroom like a man looking for an exit. Even if you're her mother, he said, his voice dropping an octave, that doesn't change the marriage. Clara and I signed a prenuptial agreement. That agreement is valid. eBay already transferred our joint assets. Your joint assets, and Naomi cut in, pulling a stack of bank statements from the folder, were transferred 3 months ago to shell companies in 3 different countries. MR. Vale, you transferred exactly $4,723,800. You also forged 14 documents, including Clara's mental health evaluations, Clara's employment records, and a foster care record claiming Clara had a history of violent behavior. All of this to portray her as an unstable mother, before the divorce hearing. Mr. Pike's forehead was glistening. My client. Your client, Naomi said calmly, at the same time he filed for divorce, also signed an emergency custody petition. That petition was marked, to be filed immediately after the child's birth. Mr. Vale planned to petition for sole custody of the child while the mother was left with nothing, homeless. And once he gained custody, as the confirmed biological father, he would control the Sterling family trust that Clara was about to inherit through the child. Julian finally snapped. That's my son, he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I have a right. You have one right, Naomi said, finally turning fully to face him, her voice like a blade just drawn, and that's to spend the next 20 years in a federal prison, thinking about what you did. Two men in dark blue suits stood up from the back of the gallery. Federal agents. Their movements weren't fast, but each step carried the weight of finality. Julian backed away. His foot caught a chair, and he stumbled, that elegance finally stripped from him. Clara, he said, turning to me, his voice taking on that warm, pleading tone he hadn't used in so long. Clara, we're family. Joe and me. We have a child together. Joe can't let them. He looked at him. Ide loved him for 4 years. No. Ide told myself I loved him for 4 years. In truth, I'd loved a person who didn't exist. Of all he'd designed and then inhabited, wearing a shell called Julian. The young man who'd spilled coffee on my notebook at that cafe and helped me clean it up. The man who'd shown up at my apartment on my birthday with a cake, saying, I looked up all your foster home addresses. He found a bakery near the last one you lived in, they still make the same kind. The husband who'd made me breakfast every morning after I got pregnant, saying, you'll be a good mother, because you know what it feels like to be overlooked. Joy, you never let your child feel that way. Everything he did, he'd calculated. Clara, he said again, reaching for me. He looked at that hand. Long fingers, neat nails. Ide held that hand falling asleep on countless nights. Don't touch me, I said. My voice was steady. He surprised myself. Julian's hand stopped midair. You knew from the beginning, I said, still steady, still calm, the calm of the dead center of a storm. You found me on purpose. Joe made me fall in love with you on purpose. Joe got me pregnant on purpose. Joe. My voice finally broke. One word, lodged in my throat, turning into a short, uncontrollable sob. You did all of it for her money. Julian's face went a strange shade of gray. Clara, it's not. Samuel Doss, Naomi said, her voice cutting through again like someone had hit pause and then play. Mr. Vale, do you know that name? Julian's pupils contracted. The thin man standing in the shadows by the door stepped forward. He looked about 50, wore a wrinkled brown jacket, and carried an old leather briefcase. His hair was messy, like a man who'd been running his fingers through it too many times. His eyes were heavy, the kind of heavy that came from carrying something for too many years. My name is Samuel Doss, he said, his voice rough. I'm the private investigator Mr. Vale hired 4 years ago. Julian let out a low growl. You took my money. I took your money to search through your mother's belongings, Samuel said, his gaze crossing the entire courtroom and landing on me. I found the nurse schedules for Miss St. Matthew's Hospital. I found Margaret Vale's, your mother's, shift records from that time. He found the bassinet number. He found the time window when the child was moved. He found all of it. Then I told you, and you. He stopped, swallowing. You told me this had to stay secret. Joe said if you acted without enough evidence, the child might disappear again. You said you needed to tell her at the right time. He believed you then. His fingers tightened on the briefcase handle. Then I saw you get married. He saw your wife get pregnant. He saw you start moving money overseas. He saw what you were preparing. That custody petition, you had me draft the first few paragraphs. He closed his eyes. I should have called the police then. But I didn't. He told myself I was just a document collector. It wasn't my job to judge. It wasn't my job to stop. But now, he opened his eyes, looking at me. Now I want to say to your face, I'm sorry. The courtroom was quiet for a long time. Julian's lawyer, Mr. Pique, seemed to be weighing something, his eyes darting between Julian, the judge, Naomi, like a gambler calculating how much could be salvaged from a losing hand. Your Honor, Naomi said, I have one final piece of evidence. She opened another folder. Julian stopped breathing. Margaret Vale, Mr. Vale's mother, recorded a confession before she died. Her health had deteriorated significantly. She may have known she didn't have much time. She gave the recording to Samuel Doss, on the condition that it be opened after her death. Naomi pulled a small tape recorder from the folder. This recording addresses the abduction, the forgeries, and the identity of the person who ordered them. We verified the recording's authenticity through voice analysis. Your Honor, I ask you to decide whether to play it in open court. Judge Carter was silent for a long time. His gaze traveled across the courtroom, past the reporters, past his gavel and papers, landing on me. The way he looked at me now was completely different from the way he'd looked at me hours ago. Then, I was just a plaintiff in a divorce case, a young woman described as unstable, a foster child too dependent, a wife unable to live independently by the man divorcing her. Now he looked at me like a man reading a math problem he couldn't solve. Play it, he said, his voice barely audible. I need to know the truth. Naomi pressed play. Static hissed for a moment. Then a voice came through, an old woman's voice, hoarse and weak, speaking through a deep exhaustion. My name is Margaret Vale. She paused. In the background, the beeping of hospital equipment, the distant sound of a door opening and closing. I'm dying. I never told anyone about this, except my son, but that's another story, and he doesn't know everything either. Now I'm going to say what I know. Anoter pause. 30 years ago, I worked as a nurse in the maternity ward at St. Matthew's Hospital. One night, a man came to see me. He was well dressed, his hair perfect, his shoes shiny. He had two men in uniforms with him. He said they were hospital security supervisors. But I found out later they weren't. They were his bodyguards. The man said there would be a fire alarm that night. He said when the alarm went off, I'd take a baby out through the side stairwell. He said the baby was not well and needed special care. He gave me an address and said to bring the child there. Bought me a lot of money, $60,000 cash, in a brown paper bag. 60,000. He was a nurse then. I didn't make that much in a year. The recording carried the sound of labored breathing. I asked him, what about the parents? He said the parents had agreed. He said it was a legal arrangement, just needed to be discreet. He believed him. He was a stupid woman. He needed money. He had a son, a little boy to raise. Julian's lips were moving. Soundless. He guessed he was saying, Mom, please, don't. The fire alarm was fake. He carried that baby out through the side stairwell. She was so small, so light. He carried her 3 blocks. My arms went numb. He found the house, a white old house with the curtains drawn. He handed the baby to a woman inside. Then I went back. He went back to the hospital, and everyone was saying, false alarm, and nobody was looking for the baby. You know what happened after that? The recording went quiet for a long time. Just the steady beeping. Years later, I saw the news. The Sterling family was offering $5 million for that child. $5 million. He was sitting in my little kitchen, drinking cheap instant coffee, watching a woman cry on TV. She said her daughter had been stolen. He recognized her. He'd seen her photo, in the hospital intake files. The man, the well-dressed man, her husband. Her voice changed then. Slower. Quieter. Like someone finally understanding something they'd spent years refusing to see. That man was the man I saw. The father of that child, at least the legal father. He arranged to steal her himself. Static hissed. I went to see him. Months later. I pretended to be a follow-up nurse from the hospital, went to his office. I don't know what I thought. Maybe I wanted to ask him why. Maybe I wanted him to fix it. But when he saw me, he didn't ask any questions. He just pulled out his checkbook and gave me another 50,000. Then he said something I never forgot. He said, that child isn't mine. She won't live long anyway. Children like that, they always have problems. You did us all a favor. The recording carried a strange sound, like the woman was sobbing, or coughing. Later I heard the child went into the system. She was alive. He never found out who she was, or where she was sent. He never went looking again. I told myself I'd done what I could. I told myself it wasn't my fault, I just did what someone asked. He took money 3 times. He ruined a woman's life. He stole a baby. Now I'm dying. This is the only thing I can do, say it. I'm sorry to that child. I am sorry to her mother. The recording ended. No one in the courtroom made a sound. He stood there, one hand automatically pressed to my stomach, the other at my side. My fingertips were cold. My lips were cold. I saw my own hands shaking, but I couldn't feel it. He turned to Julian. His face was completely drained of color. Those warm chocolate eyes were like two glass beads soaked in water, empty of everything. Your mother. He started, my voice like a broken instrument. Your mother stole me. And you found her records. You've been known for 4 years. Clara. Asterisco, that's why you talked to me at the cafe. Asterisco, that's why you knew about the foster homes, the things I told you, the things I never wanted anyone to know, you knew them and you used them. She gave you money, he said, his voice so small, like a child making excuses, Sterling. She gave you all the money in the world. Think about it, you never had that your whole life. You don't need me. I never needed you, I said, so quietly it was almost to myself, I just thought I did. Julian's expression changed. It was like an animal backed into a corner, looking at the hunters closing in, calculating which direction might still offer an escape. His gaze swept the courtroom, the pale face on the bench, the humming recorder on the clerk's desk, the tactical gear guards in the corners, the 2 federal agents by the door. If you put me away, he turned to me, his voice suddenly urgent, the false warmth completely stripped away, your son won't have a father. Do you want him to grow up the way you did, with no father? My words caught in my throat. But I heard my own voice say, Samuel won't grow up like you did. You have someone to show him what honesty looks like. Julian's lips pressed together. He'll be with me, I said, my hand on my stomach, feeling that small, warm life moving inside. I don't need your money. He never did. He just needed someone to tell me I was worth loving. Something flickered across his face. But it wasn't regret. It wasn't regret. I could have loved you, he said quietly, if you'd just been an ordinary woman, without all that behind you. I was always an ordinary woman, I said, you're the one who turned me into a plan. The federal agents stepped forward. They moved gently, like they didn't want to startle him, but each step was sure. One of them produced a pair of handcuffs. Julian stepped back. Wait. Julian Vale, you are under arrest. I never touched her, he shouted. His voice had changed. It was a pitch I'd never heard him use, sharp, oarse, like an animal pushed to the breaking point. I never hit her. How can this possibly be? The victims of kidnapping and conspiracy don't require physical contact, one of the agents said, put your hands where I can see them. Julian looked at the handcuffs. His eyes held something I remembered. The night he first took me to see the sunset, his car had broken down on a country road, and he'd sat in the driver's seat fiddling with something, then turned to me with those eyes and said, we might have to walk. But look, the moon's up. Those same eyes. But this time, there was no road to walk together. The agents took Julian away. His handcuffs caught the light, a cold glint of metal. At the door, he turned back once, just once, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him. He stood there, feeling the whole world spin slowly around me. He needed to sit down, but my legs didn't feel like mine anymore. My hand rested on my stomach, feeling the baby kick. He'd been kicking for a while now, like he was trying to escape the chaos. Eleanor came up beside me, her hand light on my arm. Are you all right? She asked. Her voice was soft, careful. He looked at her. No one had ever asked me that before. The foster parents, all those adults who came and went, they always said, what do you need, or you should get yourself a glass of water. No one ever asked, are you all right? My mouth opened. Then I felt the pain. It didn't come from anywhere else, it was my body itself, starting in the center of my abdomen, like a knife cutting from inside. He went down. Clara. Eleanor's voice came from far away. Someone was shouting for an ambulance. Someone was shouting, move back. Someone's hands were on my shoulder, Someone was checking my pulse. He felt my dress get wet. Warm liquid running down my legs, soaking the chair, spreading across the floor. My baby, I heard myself say, my voice coming from the bottom of a well. He's not due yet, he's got another month. He'll be fine. Eleanor's voice was right next to my ear, her hand cradling my head. You'll be fine too, Clara. He found you. I'm not letting you go again. Someone lifted me. He saw fluorescent lights passing overhead in rows, like a fast rewind. People were running, people were shouting. Then I saw Judge Carter. He stood at the end of the hallway, his face white as paper, hands clenched at his sides like he wanted to come forward but couldn't. His lips were moving. What was he saying? It was saying, my daughter. It was saying, my daughter. Then everything went dark. I woke to the smell of antiseptic and something floral. The room was white, the lights dim, the curtains half-drawn with sunlight coming through the gap. The pain was still there. But different, rhythmic now, like waves coming and going, each stronger than the last. She's contracting, a voice said, 5 centimeters. It may be a while. Can she hear us? She should be able to. Clara? If you can hear me, blink. He blinked. Eleanor's face appeared above me. Her silver gray bun had come loose, strands falling around her face, tear tracks dried at the corners of her eyes. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in hours. It's been 6 hours, she said softly. You woke up once on the operating table, they did an emergency C-section assessment, but your body started labor on its own. You're safe now. The baby's safe too. He raised my hand. It was heavy, but I lifted it, pressing it against my stomach. The little one was still moving. Still kicking. He'll be fine, Eleanor said, and there was a strange certainty in her voice, like someone who'd spent years practicing how to convince herself everything would be okay. The head of obstetrics is Harvard-trained. eBay had my personal physician fly in from New York. He'll be here in 15 minutes. He left. It was small, barely audible, but it escaped. You chartered a helicopter? He asked. She blinked. A plane, she said, private. From Peterborough. He closed my eyes. My whole life, all those foster homes, all those garbage bags full of belongings, all those you're moving to a new home tomorrow notices, no one had ever chartered a plane for me. Don't fall asleep, Eleanor said, her hand closing around mine. You've still got a long way to go. But I'll be right here. Another contraction. He squeezed her hand. She wore a diamond ring. That hand, diamond and all, went white in my grip, but she didn't pull away. She just covered mine with her other hand, wrapping both around my sweating, shaking fingers. Breathe, she said softly, follow me. In, then out. He followed her rhythm. In, out. In, out. The pain came in waves, each stronger than the last, but her hand was always there, her voice always there. You're doing so well, she said, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You don't even know me, I said. I know you, she said, so softly it made my chest ache. I held you when you were born. You were just over 6 pounds, so small I was afraid you'd disappear in my hands. Your eyes were the palest blue I'd ever seen. The nurses said all newborns have blue eyes, but I knew that wasn't true. Your blue was different. Pale, like winter sky. And now I'm looking at you, and you're still that same color. My tears came. Don't cry, she whispered, wiping my cheek with her thumb. You'll have time to cry when you see the baby. You have all the time in the world. Another wave of pain. Then more commotion, more doctors and nurses, more voices. Someone counting. Someone shouting one more time. Someone putting ice chips in my mouth. Pain. I cried. It was sharp and loud, like the smallest warrior in the world announcing its arrival. He heard that cry like a trumpet call. It's a boy, the doctor said, healthy. 5 weeks early, but all vitals are normal. He's crying, that's good, means his lungs are fine. They placed something small and pink and wrinkled on my chest. It was so tiny I was almost afraid to hold him with both hands. His fingers were curled, little fists clenched tight, like, I'm here, and I came to fight. His eyes were closed. His hair was dark, like his father's. Like mine. I looked at that tiny face, scrunched up, making those tiny kitten-like sounds. He bent down and kissed his forehead. "Hello, Samuel," I whispered. Eleanor let out a sound behind me, a choked sob she couldn't quite hold back. "You named him Samuel?" she asked. "Samuel Doss," I said, "the private investigator." I could have said nothing. But he stepped forward. Eleanor nodded. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Good," she said, "that's a good name." 3 days after Samuel was born, Judge Carter came. He didn't announce himself. Eleanor told me he'd called and asked if he could see the baby. But I knew he was coming to see me, he just didn't know how to say it. He stood in the hospital room doorway, wearing civilian clothes, a dark blue sweater and khakis, and he looked like a completely different man from the one in the black robe, striking the gavel. He was thinner. His hair seemed wider. The shadows under his cheekbones were deeper. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was polite, like a stranger's. He nodded. Samuel was asleep in the bassinet next to my bed, wrapped in a white blanket, one small hand poking out from the edge, fingers slightly curled. Judge Carter stood in the doorway for a while, looking at the baby. His expression was complicated, like he wanted to step forward but wasn't sure he had the right. "He looks like you," he finally said, "you must have looked just like this." He looked at him. "You have something to say to me," I said. He nodded, walking slowly to the bedside, sitting in the visitor's chair. It was too small for him, his knees almost touched the bed frame. "I didn't know," he said, hands clasped together on his knees, "I really didn't know you were my daughter. Eleanor, 31 years ago, she came to me, after she'd left Richard. She said she was pregnant. He said I'd be there for her. But she disappeared for a week, and when she came back, she told me the baby had died." His voice was flat, but I saw his knuckles were white. "I didn't investigate. I didn't ask for details. I just believed her. She was the wife of the most powerful man in the country, and I was a small-time legal aid attorney. What could I do? I told myself we were never meant to be together. And I went on with my life. Married, divorced, married again, I never. I stopped. I never once thought that child could still be alive." He was quiet for a long time. He looked at him. This man's face, which I'd watched transform so many times in these hours. Fierce, the unapproachable judge. Then the shocked father. Now a man sitting in a too small chair, not knowing where to put his hands. "When Eleanor came to you," I said, "what was she like?" He blinked. She was beautiful. But not in that, she was exhausted. She was terrified. She kept looking at the door while she talked, like she was afraid someone would burst in. That man, Richard, he controlled everything. Her money, her schedule, who she saw. She came to me because she needed someone to tell her she wasn't crazy. Was she? He looked at me. She wasn't. Richard was abusive. But back then, wealth and power made people keep their mouths shut. No one would ask about her husband. Everyone pretended everything was normal. Only she. Only she knew it was all fake, I said. He nodded. "Do you know what that feels like?" I asked. "Everyone telling you you're just overthinking, you're just too sensitive, you just don't know how good you have it, but you know. You know the things that are wrong. You know you're not loved. You know you go to bed every night afraid of what will happen when you wake up." Judge Carter's lips moved, but no sound came out. "I spent my whole life pretending," I said, "pretending I was a normal kid. Pretending I didn't wake up in the middle of the night. Pretending I trusted the people who said they'd be my family. But I never trusted anyone. I used pretender." Samuel stirred in the bassinet, making a small, indistinct sound. I didn't turn to look at him. He looked at this man, my biological father. "You've never been a father," I said. His face went pale. "I'm not accusing you," I said, "I'm just telling you a fact. You never knew I existed, so you never had the chance. But the choice now is mine. It was quiet for a moment. I know, he said, I won't ask you to call me Dad. I won't ask you to let me into your life, unless you want me there. I just want you to know, if you need anything at all, I'll do my best. Stay a judge, I said, keep being a judge. He stared at me. Don't quit because you owe me something, I said, are you a good judge? He thought about it for a long time. I try to be fair, he said, but the judgment I made that day, that was the worst decision I've ever made. You didn't know the truth then, I said. I should have known. I should have seen the evidence was forged. I should have looked more carefully. You'll be more careful now, I said, because you'll remember that day. Joy, you remember a pregnant woman standing in front of you with no money, no connections, no one speaking for her. Every time you sit in that chair from now on, you'll remember her. He looked at me. There was something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite name. Maybe surprise. Maybe relief. Maybe the confirmation of something he'd just realized. You're like her, he said softly. Like who? Eleanor. Your mother. She was like this when she was young, she saw the best possibility in the worst situation. She stayed where others left. I didn't answer. But something in my chest loosened. Just a little. Like the edge of an ice floe starting to melt, water droplets sliding down the surface. Do you want to hold him? He asked. His expression changed. Complete surprise, completely unguarded, like a whole wall had suddenly collapsed, revealing something he'd never shown. Cani. He nodded. He stood up and walked to the bassinet. His hands were shaking, those hands that had brought down so many gavels, were shaking now. He leaned down, carefully lifting Samuel from the blanket, holding him like he was carrying something impossibly precious. Samuel woke up. His eyes opened, those newborn, gray-blue eyes that couldn't see anything clearly yet, and looked at the man holding him. Hulke Carter made a sound. Something between a laugh and a cry. Hey, he said softly, I'm your grandfather. You might not call me that for a long time. That's okay. Wait. Samuel yawned. He sat in the hospital bed, watching this. Sunlight from the window filtered through the curtains, falling on the floor, on the too small chair, on the man's shoulders. They never had a father. They never had a place to call home. Back here, in this white room, with this man holding my son, with that woman standing outside in the hallway not knowing whether to come in or leave, it was beginning to take shape. A month later, I walked out of the hospital. Samuel was in his infant carrier, held in Eleanor's arms. The way she held him was like someone holding something she'd spent 30 years searching for, careful, but with a pride she couldn't quite hide. When we walked out the hospital doors, there was a black SUV waiting. But not like any I'd seen before. Be here. Quieter. When the door opened, there was even a faint lemon scent inside. I live in Connecticut, Eleanor said, but if you'd like, you can stay at my New York apartment first. It has 6 bedrooms, so you'll have plenty of space. If you want your own place, I can help you. Eleanor. She stopped. I can stay with you, I said, for now. She said nothing. But her arms tightened around Samuel. Something glistened in the corner of her eye, but her voice was steady, okay. For now. The car moved through the city streets. He looked out the window at the buildings and streetlights I'd passed 1,000 times but never really seen. He remembered being 20, dragging a single suitcase out of my last foster home. They'd given me a garbage bag, a black garbage bag, to hold everything I owned. I thought that was all I'd ever get. Clara? He turned. Eleanor was looking at me, one hand resting gently on mine. Before I could pull away, she'd wrapped her fingers around it. What are you thinking about? Garbage bags, I said. Her expression changed. Subtle, just a shift in the light of her eyes, but I saw it. Do you want to tell me? She asked. He almost said no. They never told anyone about those things. But Samuel fussed in his carrier, like he was urging me on. When I left the last foster home at 18, I said, they gave me a garbage bag. A black garbage bag with all my things. My clothes, my books, The only photo I had of my birth mother, a social worker had given it to me when I was little, and the frame had broken in a move, so I kept it in a book. The bag broke. He got halfway down the street and everything fell out. The photo ended up mixed in with old clothes and used tissues. He stood in the middle of the road and picked up that book. He told myself, this is everything you have. Get used to it. The car was quiet for a long time. Then Eleanor said, very softly, do you still have that photo? Lost, I said, it got lost in later moves. I don't even know where it ended up. She held my hand tighter. I'll find it, she said, maybe not the same one. But I can find things about you. They took pictures of you when you were born, standard hospital procedure. Maybe they still have the negatives. The photo wasn't of me, I said, it was a woman I didn't know. That was your mother, Eleanor said, me. You never knew what I looked like. But I have a whole photo album. 70 years of them. You see how I got old. You see how a young woman in heels became an old woman in cashmere. She laughed a little. He looked at her. You're not old, I said. Eleanor's lashes trembled. You look 45, I said. Her tears finally came. That night, we reached her apartment. It really did have 6 bedrooms. He stood at the living room window, watching the Manhattan skyline light up against the night. Samuel was asleep in the bassinet beside me, his breathing shallow, his lips parted, like a small seashell wrapped in peace. Eleanor came up beside me with a cup of tea, holding it out. You don't have to decide anything now, she said, you can stay here. You can leave. You can go anywhere you want. Ella supported. He looked at the steam rising from the cup. I want to start a foundation, I said. She looked at me. For kids leaving the foster system, I said, housing. Money. Lawyers. Someone to tell them they don't have to stay in bad places. They can leave. Someone will catch them. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She took a sip of her own tea. That'll take a lot of money, she said. I know. You know you have 9 billion now. I heard. She looked at me. Moonlight from the window fell on her white cashmere sweater, on her silver gray hair. Her eyes looked even bluer in the moonlight. What are you going to call it? She asked. The Open Door, I said. She smiled. That's good, she said, good name. 1 year later. Samuel could sit up on his own. He sat in Eleanor's lap, both little hands gripping her thumbs, making babbling sounds like he was having a very serious conversation. Judge Carter sat on the other side, half-turned, holding a teething biscuit to Samuel's mouth, saying, slowly, slowly. Samuel bit off half of it in one go. He stood behind the podium. The courtroom was the same one. Same wood, same fluorescent hum, same smell of stale coffee and old paper. But this time, I was at the front. The room was full. Reporters. Lawyers. People I'd never met, 37 former foster children that my foundation had already supported, some sitting in the gallery in borrowed suits, their eyes holding that careful hope. He cleared my throat. Thank you all for coming today, I said, I have something to announce. He paused. Samuel was giggling in the audience. Judge Carter was brushing teething biscuit crumbs off his sweater. I've put half of the Sterling Trust, approximately $4.6 billion, into the Open Door Foundation. That money will go toward housing, legal aid, education, and mental health services for young people leaving the foster system. We expect to serve at least 10,000 people over the next 10 years. Applause. After it faded, a reporter raised his hand. Clara, he said, he was already calling me by my first name, like we knew each other. Why are you giving away so much? You just found your mother, you just realized you have this huge fortune. You could keep it all for yourself and your child. Why give it away? He looked out at the room. I looked at Eleanor, head bent, poking Samuel's belly with one finger, making him giggle. I looked at Judge Carter, clumsily trying to fold the teething biscuit wrapper into a neat square. He looked at the young faces in the back, faces I'd never seen but recognized anyway. Some of them had been in the same foster system I'd been in, maybe we'd slept in the same building at different times, never knowing. Because money didn't save me, I said, the truth did. Before I knew I was a sterling, before I knew my mother had never stopped looking, before I knew my father had lived his whole life in misunderstanding and guilt, I survived. I didn't survive because of wealth. I didn't survive because of someone's name. I survived because of one very basic thing: I knew I deserved to be loved. Not everyone is that lucky. A lot of kids, like I was, don't know they deserve it. They think they deserve to be overlooked, forgotten, shuffled from home to home. That thought seeps into your bones until you feel like you never really belonged anywhere. I pause, looking at the quiet faces. What I want to do is tell them, that's not true. They can walk out. They can have a place to go back to. They can be someone's family. They can keep going until they find a place where they want to stay. The applause came again. Louder this time. Longer. Samuel let out a loud shriek in the audience, like he was cheering for his grandmother's new dress. Afterward, Eleanor came up to me. She held Samuel in one arm and handed me a small velvet box with the other. I opened it. Inside there was a faded hospital bracelet, the blue and white plastic yellowed with age, the word sterling female written in ballpoint pen. 30 years, Eleanor said, I've moved at least a dozen times. But I never threw it away. I took it out of the box. The plastic was light as a dried leaf. I slipped it over my wrist. Thank you, I said. Eleanor shook her head. Don't thank me. I was just looking for a way home. And now I've found it. She leaned down and kissed my forehead. Her lips were light, like a mother kissing her daughter at a bassinet 30 years ago. I closed my eyes. Behind me, Judge Carter was fumbling with Samuel's coat buttons. Muttering, you're growing faster than your mother did. She wasn't this heavy at your age. Samuel grabbed his tie and pulled. Oh lait, Judge Carter said softly, you win. Pull it. I opened my eyes. The sun was coming through the window, falling on the wooden floor of the courtroom. Outside, it was winter, but the sky was clear, that rare, clean, pale blue, almost like ice. The same color as my eyes.